amazing. It's amazing. That is absolutely phenomenal. I have to tell my kids that I'm a rock star now.
Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Yesterday, you'll remember, White House Chief of Staff John Kelly delivered 18 minutes of mesmerizing remarks from the briefing room. He begged politicians and the press not to politicize the mourning of Gold Star families. General Kelly singled out Florida Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, who you just saw, for special criticism. He called Wilson, quote, an empty barrel, forever talking about herself and ever willing to exploit the dead to burnish her own reputation.
And a congresswoman stood up, and in the long tradition of empty barrels making the most noise, stood up there and all of that, and talked about how she was instrumental in getting the funding for that building. And we were stunned that she'd done it. Even for someone that is that empty a barrel, we were stunned.
So how did the Congresswoman respond? Well, chastened by this criticism from a man who has given his life and lost a son in the service of this country, Congresswoman Wilson apologized for her demagoguery, pledging that from now on she'll stick to fighting the president over disagreements about policy. No, wait, just kidding. In fact, Congresswoman Wilson seemed delighted by the attack on her, mostly because it made her more famous, which, by the way, just goes to prove that General Kelly was right in the first place. The Congresswoman is now bragging with characteristic immodesty. She's become a rock star.
You mean to tell me that I have become so important that the White House is following me and my words? This is amazing. It's amazing. That is absolutely phenomenal. I have to tell my kids that I'm a rock star now.
24 hours later, there's still no evidence that Congresswoman Wilson listened to or thought about anything General Kelly actually said, much less learned from it. Instead, and you'll be shocked by the creativity here, she now dismisses General Kelly as a racist. Keep in mind that General Kelly said not a single word about race because race was entirely irrelevant to what he was talking about. Doesn't matter. He's a bigot, says Congresswoman Wilson. How exactly does she know that? Well, because the phrase empty barrel, a term she concedes she's never heard before, is, according to Congresswoman Frederica Wilson of Florida, a racist slur.
Empty barrels make the most noise. And he was using that, and he was likening that to you. Basically, that
I think that's a racist term, too. I'm thinking about that when we looked it up in the dictionary because I had never heard of an empty barrel. And I don't like to be dragged into something like that.
Looked it up in the dictionary. That definition isn't there, by the way. What you're looking at, though, is another disgraced politician alleging yet more fake bias crimes to hide her own failures. You'd think Democrats would be embarrassed by this routine by now. It's tired and absurd, not to mention divisive and dumb. Who's not sick of it at this point? But nope, Democrats still willing to defend it because, whatever it takes. MSNBC Lawrence O'Donnell explained to his viewers that the phrase empty barrel, which, by the way, was coined by Plato and used by Shakespeare, is indeed racist because it was part of a broader effort to, quote, dehumanize Frederica Wilson.
John Kelly never sat beside a student like Frederica Wilson in his elementary school. The language about black people in John Kelly's white neighborhood was exactly the same language about black people that was used at that time in white communities in the segregated South. I know the neighborhood John Kelly comes from. I know the culture. It was a neighborhood in which calling someone who looked like Frederica Wilson an empty barrel was the kindest thing that would have been said about her. You know what wasn't sacred when he was a kid growing up, where he was growing up? Black women. He took time, a lot of extra time, to call a black woman who he doesn't know and he doesn't like an empty barrel.
Unbelievable. MSNBC's Joy Reid, never one for subtlety, went even farther than that. She attacked General Kelly's entire childhood as racist. Quote, Kelly grew up in segregated Boston, she tweeted, in an Irish Catholic neighborhood where women were bullied, not honored, and blacks scorned and rejected. Because really, there's nothing like using growth ethnic stereotypes when you're fighting for racial justice, as she says she is. According to Joy Reid, the problem isn't just General Kelly, it's the Irish. They're the problem. This is grotesque, obviously. The morons making these arguments are sick. It's a symptom of disease to imagine racism behind every disagreement. It's also, by the way, the death of traditional political debate. You can argue with people who disagree with you, who are just wrong, but there's no reasoning with bigots. You can only crush them. Your opponents suddenly become your enemies. They must be destroyed. And that, by the way, is how many on the left now see General Kelly, not to mention you and me. Mark Green is the chief of staff of the Shadow Cabinet. That's an anti-Trump organization. He joins us now. Mark, the problem I have with this is not that Frederica Wilson doesn't like being attacked by General Kelly. I get that. Or that there's disagreement over what the president said. Fine. But why did demagogues like Frederica Wilson and the people you just saw on cable television turn this into something it's not, which is a racial dispute? There's nothing racial about this. Why pretend there is?
I don't think it was a racial dispute. What you've done is take a comment she made, I thought was ill-advised, that the empty barrels thing had a racial connotation. Of course, the issue is not Congresswoman Wilson. No, you want to go off on race. That's derivative.
I don't.
The issue is General Kelly, unarguably, has served with distinction from being a Marine to a 4-star, suffered a grievous loss of his son, and we can only admire him. And his comments were mesmerizing when he focused on that. First issue is, why do we have a president who now has been shown again to have lied about what he said? Second, it's not only what he said that was untrue, it's what he didn't say. The issue, of course, is 4 deceased Green Berets in battle,
you're
in
ignoring
Niger,
my question. As I imagined you would. You're ignoring my question entirely to give your speech about Trump.
Why he's been silent for 12 days than Representative Wilson, who's stellar in her community. A principal, a congresswoman, a state senator.
Will you look? And I'm not attacking her record as a member of Congress.
I know you're not.
I'm merely making the obvious point, which is political debate of the kind you spent your life engaging in, Me Too, grinds to a halt the second you start calling people racist on the basis of no evidence. It's a conversation ender, not a starter. And it's so common now on the left that I think it is destroying any hope of an actual conversation. And she just engaged in it. You saw it. I'm not mischaracterizing her remarks. She was followed up by the demagogues on that other channel, echoing them, expanding them, attacking the guy's family in his neighborhood as if they know anything about it. And I'm just saying this is of a piece of a lot of this kind of behavior we're seeing recently. And you know it.
Well, I've already said I don't think she should have said it. I don't think the president of the United States should have exonerated white racists saying Jews will not replace us down south, as you know he did. So as between the president using, hold it, of course he said that, right?
Them for saying that. I mean,
he said both
if I thought
sides were
the president of the United States was okay with that, I mean, that's like disgusting. And I don't agree with that, by the way.
All right, but now let's talk about this. Let's talk about this episode. The president, as you know, when he was asked at a photographic session, said, I never said that to the widow, and Representative Wilson is lying, and I have proof. Tucker, that was all false, correct?
Okay.
Yes or no?
No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, to be totally honest with you, I think this debate is stupid, actually. The president calls this widow and says, look, I'm sorry that your son got killed. Right. I think there's a fair question as to what American troops were doing in Niger in the first place. That's legitimate.
Okay, second question.
The guy's trying to offer condolence. Like, what is this about? Talk about a dumb distraction from the actual business of the world.
You know, I don't disagree. If Trump or the White House had said, he tried to be genuine, he was sympathetic, he made the call, he may have misspoken. Of course, the widow and the mother were very upset by what he said. All he had to do was say, I'm sorry if I misspoke, that wasn't in my heart. That would have been fine.
It was the demagogue from Florida who made it into an issue in the first place. Liz, I heard what the president said. It's like, what? Why are you inserting yourself, I would ask Frederica Wilson, Congresswoman Wilson, into this?
It was very funny when Sarah Sanders said it, and General Kelly, it's terrible when a politician makes themselves the center of attention and not the issue. I wonder who would have done that when President Trump, the day after being inaugurated, went to the CIA Wall of Heroes and talked about his crowd size. So let's focus on the president. I know we're on Fox.
If you don't like it in one case, you don't like it in another.
Okay,
but what I'm saying, is something broader than, look, this president will come and go.
Why didn't he talk about Niger for 4 deaths, 12 days, the same number, of course, as died in Benghazi, and the LA Times today said massive intelligence failure and they didn't have adequate air cover. I don't know. LA Times
I don't know
reported
either,
it.
and I'm willing to believe any of that, but what I find impossible as someone who hosts a daily show is having a rational conversation with anybody when To Kill a Mockingbird is now racist, when the ice cream truck music is now racist, when everything that the left doesn't like is now racist. You can't have a rational conversation anymore. And I wonder why smart people on the left like you don't say something about this.
Okay, you don't want to talk about President Trump. I get it. Let's talk about racists. Was it racist when Donald Trump said President Obama wasn't born here?
No, I don't know. No,
really?
It's a factual.
Really?
Is it racist? No. Look, I think Obama was born here. I don't care where he was born, to be honest with you. I don't know why that was racist. Yeah. But like we all had to sort of say, yeah, that's racist. I mean, I don't know. It seems like a dumb conversation from beginning to end.
Race has been put into the conversation from birtherism to Charlottesville to
birtherism. I never even got that. It was like another dumb talking point on both sides, in my opinion. But whatever. Mark Green, thank you for
President Trump cuts it out, and I don't think.
Okay. Howie Carr hosts a radio show in Boston. He writes for the Boston Herald. He's from Boston. He breathes Boston. And when you hear him talk, you know he's fully Boston. Howie Carr, thanks for joining us tonight. You saw your city impugned last night on another channel when a couple of hosts said, look, General Kelly is clearly a bigot because he's from Boston. How did you take that as a native son?
Well, it's outrageous. Lawrence O'Donnell shouldn't have said that. He also said that he and General Kelly come from identical backgrounds. Actually, Lawrence O'Donnell's father was a lawyer, and General Kelly's father was a milkman. And after high school, Lawrence O'Donnell went to Harvard College, and General Kelly went into the U.S. Marine Corps. And we're talking about Boston, the desegregation problems, the rioting and all that. When that all began, Lawrence O'Donnell was writing snide essays in Cambridge at the Harvard Lampoon, and General Kelly was a commuter going to UMass Boston. I mean, they come from very different backgrounds. Lawrence O'Donnell is too.
You must have been confused when you saw Joy Reid, who, by the way, also went to Harvard, another oppressed Harvard graduate, went on to say that it was basically his neighborhood that did it. It was a neighborhood in which women were disrespected, in which men were racist. It seemed to me like she was acting out of the kind of ugliest traditional stereotypes about Irish immigrants. That's what it sounded like to me.
I agree. I mean, does she know what's in General Kelly's heart? Does Lawrence O'Donnell know what's in their heart? Do they know anything about Oak Square, Brighton? He went to St. Mary's High School in Waltham, Massachusetts. He would take the trolley over with two other guys to that high school in the late 1960s. One of the guys that he used to take the trolley with every day is a guy named William Francis Galvin, who is now the Secretary of State of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, a Democrat elected repeatedly statewide. Are Lawrence O'Donnell and Joy Reid saying that Bill Galvin is a racist as well? And this whole thing about the empty barrel, if they listen to the interview that John Kelly gave when he was appointed chief of staff, he said his mother used to call people empty barrels. I mean, like you said, it's not a racial term at all. It goes back to classical Greece and Shakespeare. This whole thing is ridiculous. They have no idea what they're talking about. I mean, Lawrence O'Donnell likes to pose as a tough street kid at moments like this. When Whitey Bulger the gangster was arrested a few years back, he went on the show and told this long, involved story about some woman he knew Whitey. We're supposed to think he's some kind of, up by his bootstraps kind of guy, and that's not who he is, but it is who John Kelly is.
Huh? So you don't think that's an accurate self-depiction of Lawrence O'Donnell?
I don't think he's a tough street kid.
Look, I'm from La Jolla. I wouldn't know the difference, but that's why we want to talk to you tonight. Howie Carr, the voice of Boston. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Tucker.
Harvey Weinstein's stint in rehab doesn't seem to be going very well, or look at it another way, it seems to be going very well. We've got details next. Well, there are new developments in the Harvey Weinstein saga tonight. A lawyer representing one of Weinstein's accusers held a press conference earlier today. That's one day after his client held a lengthy interview with the Los Angeles Police Department. This decision to go to the press reportedly has police concerned, though, because they think the publicity seeking will look bad to prosecutors and potentially to a criminal jury. Harvey Levin is following all of this, of course. He's the founder of TMZ. He hosts Objectified Now, Sunday nights right here on Fox, and he joins us tonight. Harvey, what was the thinking behind doing press interviews?
Well, it's baffling, Tucker. So the woman and this lawyer named David Ring met with LAPD people in robbery homicide yesterday, literally minutes after they left. Apparently, this was choreographed. The LA Times published a story where David Ring and his client had sat down with the reporter and went through the case with them. The LAPD is not happy about that. The detectives that we've spoken with have said, look, and I know this just from covering these cases, that they believe it compromises the case because they want to talk to witnesses who can give a fresh account without having anything in their heads about what the woman is saying.
Right.
And now that the story is out, it creates a problem. The lawyer then doubles down and he puts on his website this morning that he's representing this woman, that they have gone to the police, and then he links to the LA Times. Then he triples down today and holds this news conference. And my reporter at the news conference said to him, "Why did you talk to the LA Times?" And his answer was, well, they kind of ambushed me because they heard that my client was meeting, so I felt I had to talk to them. And, you know, my understanding from that is a lot of lawyers, because I know this, rather than saying, okay, here's the case, they say no comment. And he didn't do that.
Yeah, because he's a publicity seeker, like so many of them, doing his client wrong, I would argue. Is reports that Harvey Weinstein is basically undergoing outpatient treatment, living in a hotel, chatting on a cell phone. Can we trust those accounts?
I'm hesitating only because I'm not trying to promote or tease, Tucker, but we have a pretty big story coming up that you will see if you log on to TMZ.com tomorrow morning. So I have to be circumspect about it. But what I can say to you is that Harvey Weinstein and people involved in the treatment are disputing some of that. So to be continued tomorrow morning. To be continued.
So you've interviewed Mark Cuban for your show. You're hearing all these rumblings that Mark Cuban might run for president. I guess we have to take that seriously given recent history. We actually have a clip from that interview. Here's a preview.
You need somebody who can connect to people and relate to people, and I think I qualify on each of those. Now, whether or not I'll do it, it's a big decision.
You sound like a candidate.
I'm a concerned American citizen.
Oh, so am I, but I'm not a candidate.
I wouldn't run unless I have solutions. If I have solutions, then I have something to offer. If I don't, you won't see me anywhere near being a politician.
Harvey, did he mention what those solutions were, what he believed, what his platform might be, what his ideology is?
Yeah, he talked a lot about health care. By the way, I called BS on what he had said at the very end of that because I said to him, I said, look, I said, you are sounding like a candidate. And I'm telling you, Tucker, when you watch this, Mark Cuban is seriously, he is a really smart guy, and Mark Cuban succeeds pretty much at what he wants to do. And when you listen, you will hear he is seriously considering this, and he tells me which political party he'd run on, and that's a big deal because obviously the question is, would he challenge Trump in the general or would he go after him in the primary? He answers it.
Huh? Interesting. What time is that? Sunday night?
Sunday night, 8 o'clock Eastern. They replayed again at 11 Eastern.
I'll catch both. Harvey Levin, great to see you tonight. Thank you. Well, almost immediately after allegations of abuse broke in the New York Times, Harvey Weinstein retreated into that favorite cocoon of the embattled celebrity, a luxury rehab clinic where he said he would battle against the disease of sex addiction. Doesn't seem to be going all that well from a treatment perspective. New reports say that Weinstein has been arriving late for therapy, falling asleep in sessions, even talking on a smuggled cell phone. Apparently, this disease is even worse than we could have imagined. Nell Daly is a psychotherapist. She's our window into this world, and she joins us now. So now there is new, just arriving on my iPhone, a new report that Harvey Weinstein is leaving the Arizona treatment program on Saturday, tomorrow, after a 1-week treatment. His psychologist says that he, and I'm quoting now, Harvey has been dealing with his anger, his attitude toward others, boundary work, and the beginnings of work on empathy. He's invested in the program. Pardon me if I call BS on that. Am I too cynical?
No, I would agree with you on that. I think 1 week is definitely not enough treatment time for someone who has been accused of what Harvey Weinstein's been accused of.
So it sounds like this whole thing was a deeply cynical PR diversion.
I mean, it could have been. Right? We don't know. We don't know
Right.
what his intentions were for actually going to treatment. I don't think he had very many options in terms of his PR. A lot of people who are wealthy and powerful will do something like this in order to avoid both legal action and try to rebuild their reputation. So I'm not surprised he went into
What bothers me, though, is that a licensed therapist would lend his name to a statement that non-credible, that after a week, a guy who's been apparently chatting on a cell phone and falling asleep in group meetings is on his way to a cure. As someone who practices psychotherapy, you can confirm that's ridiculous, correct?
I would say that, yes.
You would say
I would go out on a limb and say that, yes.
Go on a limb and say that.
I
So
would.
doesn't it discredit the whole enterprise, the institution of psychotherapy, these treatment centers? I mean, some of us are already suspicious about this business, but this makes it seem like a joke.
Well, the problem is that people who are accused, as he has been, of committing sexual crimes, what do we do with them in our society? So one of the things that we have to worry about is that they're going to commit these crimes again. So the reason for treatment programs is to hope that we can affect some sort of change so that when they come out of the treatment program, they're not a threat to the community.
So, I mean, there are, of course, as with everything, many different levels.
Totally.
So there are
Yeah.
people who are considered, abusive, who are abusive, but the root is their boorishness and their self-involvement.
Right,
and
there's
being
a big,
drunk.
right, and there's a big difference between someone who has sexual addiction issues and someone who's actually a sexual offender.
But if you're exposing yourself to strangers in restaurants, that does seem to cross a line into, like, compulsion.
Well, compulsion and criminal activity.
Well, of course.
So I think that in this case in particular, what many people in the psychological community, many feminists want to see happen is he actually get prosecuted. And then if he is found guilty, and I know that the state of New York, Los Angeles, the police in Los Angeles, the police in London have opened up an investigation on him and even accusing him, there's been accusations that he's actually raped, some of these victims. Right. The hope is that he will get prosecuted, and if he's found guilty, go to jail. And then the question is, do we use taxpayers' money to have him get treatment in the prison system?
Does it ever work?
It's case-by-case basis.
But my impression of the recidivism rate for sex offenders is extraordinarily high.
Very high, very high. But the problem is that we can't lock people like this up in jail for life, if we can lock them up at all. So then what do? You have to give them some sort of
don't you age out of it? I mean, he's 65 years old. Isn't there a point in a man's life when he's just too tired to sexually harass? No, I'm serious.
Yeah, I understand your question. The thing is that we can't come up with a sex offender profile. That's the one thing that we're having a hard time doing in the psychological community, because people who commit these crimes defy everything that we understand. It doesn't matter what age, what socioeconomic class. We can't quite pin down why people do this. The only thing that we do know is that the people who do commit sex crimes, 95% of them are men. So the question for me becomes, if 1 out of every 6 women in her lifetime is going to be a victim of sexual assault or rape, and 95% of the people who are the criminal offenders are men, how many men are getting away with this kind of behavior that we're not talking about? And as a society, are we complicit by not having some sort of larger understanding or system in place to actually prosecute people who do this?
Let's start with Hollywood and see where it goes from there. Really quickly, as a psychotherapist,
yes.
Don't you want to see some action taken against the ersatz shrink who's declaring Harvey Weinstein on the road to recovery? I mean, if I sell breakfast cereal and my rival breakfast cereal is like 30% rat hair, I want to take it off the market because it discredits breakfast cereal as a brand. Like, it discredits all breakfast cereal. You don't feel that way as a shrink?
I'd have to Yes, I would definitely question the judgment of that psychiatrist who is saying that he's on the road to recovery. But the problem is that he was in a voluntary
Right.
treatment center. He wasn't a mandated criminal in a treatment facility.
But
so
you
he's
shouldn't.
free to leave. He's free to leave when he wants to leave. As a psychiatrist, would I have personally come out? Again, I'm not involved in this case.
Yeah.
Would I personally come out after a week and say that, I think that he's on the road to recovery? I wouldn't put my reputation.
One thing that
on the
Harvey
line like
Weinstein
that.
proves from top to bottom is you can hire people to defend you, whether it's Lisa Bloom using her fake feminist credentials or this shrink or whatever. It's very distressing. No, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on. Thanks.
Surely everybody wants to find out how Stephen Paddock murdered 58 people, right? So why is a judge forced, apparently, to order MGM not to destroy evidence from the Mandalay Bay shooting? Perplexing. That's next. In Vegas stays in Vegas, and that apparently applies to the Mandalay Bay shooting as much as anything else. A judge in Clark County, Nevada, has ordered MGM Resorts International, the company that owns the hotel, to preserve all evidence related to the shooting, including gambling records, surveillance tape, and anything else that might be relevant. The order highlights the glacial pace of discovery in this case. It's been more than 3 weeks. Stephen Paddock's motive and a lot of his behavior remain unknown, and there's not even a settled timeline for the shooting. Why is this taking so long? Dan Bongino once worked for the Secret Service and the NYPD, and he joins us tonight. Dan, this doesn't seem like the kind of order that would come more than 3 weeks after a shooting, both because it would be obvious, of course you don't destroy evidence, and if you were going to send an order like that, wouldn't it be immediate? I'm confused.
Well, you're not wrong to be confused, Tucker. You can add this to the list of perplexing things about this case, which has me and a number of my law enforcement friends completely baffled. When you have a cooperating witness, I mean, just a quick example, God forbid you're walking down the street, somebody holds you up with a knife, but he drops the knife at the scene, the bad guy. When the cops show up, you don't throw the knife away, nor do you need a judge's order to tell you to turn over the knife to said law enforcement officer. I can only think of 2 possible scenarios here. One, completely implausible, that the Mandalay was a co-conspirator in this, which is nonsense. Or number 2, there's some kind of hostility or a trust gap developing between law enforcement and the Mandalay. Nothing else makes sense, Tucker. There's no other way to square that circle.
Well, the second scenario, I think, makes a great deal of sense, and there's evidence to support that's true. So Mandalay Bay managed the public statements of Jesus Campos, who was the security guard who was injured in the leg, and put him on Ellen, and apparently restricted his appearances to Ellen, who basically is an employee of MGM, or their sponsor for show in any case. So would that kind of behavior suggest to law enforcement these people are spinning and we better keep them under control?
You know, Tucker, they would, and if I could just be candid for a moment, I always default on the side of law enforcement when there's a question of, because I just think they have a tough job, and unless you can show me evidence they did anything wrong, I tend to default on their side there. But,
me too.
Really, with the way this has been handled between Mandalay's just gross PR operation in this with Campos and the law enforcement timeline all over, I mean, you have to start to say to yourself, this is one of the largest mass murders in American history. The public has a genuine, very real interest, Tucker, in finding out what the hell happened here. I get it. You're the cops. I was one. I totally understand your job.
Yes.
But this wasn't a burglary at the 7-Eleven. The American public is understandably a bit frightened. Like, what the heck happened? Were we dealing with a psychopath? Were we dealing with a radical, a terrorist? What's going on? And Mandalay, I have to be honest, is just not helping here with this just butchered PR campaign.
They don't seem to be at all, and they have a different agenda, which is avoiding getting sued, of course. There are, unfortunately, a lot of lawsuits brewing right now. The most confusing thing to me is, why don't the feds take charge? We know the FBI has, by their own explanation, dozens and dozens of special agents working on this. Why doesn't a spokesman come forward from the DOJ, from FBI, and say, here's the state of play, here's what we know? Why haven't they done that?
Yeah, I'd love to come on TV and go, hey, here's a really great answer from Dan Bongino. I just don't have it easy. It doesn't make sense. I mean, it's obvious to me that there have been problems from the start with basic timeline elements of this crime. Tucker, the first thing about a crime is the sequence of events. And like you said, why doesn't the Bureau, which, by the way, has custody of the evidence, I only know that because the sheriff said it at a press conference, which says to me they're the lead investigative agency at this point. Why aren't they taking over and saying, here's what we're going to do, here's how this is going to work, here's when we're going to release information, here's what we know now? I don't know. Is there pushback from the sheriff? I don't know.
Right.
I'm just not sure.
Well, it's helpful to know that you don't know, because it makes me feel less crazy, because I find this genuinely confusing. I've never seen anything like this. Dan Bongino, thank you, as always.
Yes, sir.
We've got new developments tonight in the Uranium One deal, which is growing into quite a remarkable story. Up next, we'll talk to the reporter who just revealed Bill Clinton requested permission to meet with a Russian nuclear official just as the deal was being evaluated. Remarkable. Stay tuned. Well, it looks like it may be the actual Russia scandal, the 2010 Uranium One deal, where the Obama administration approved, for reasons no one will explain at this point, giving a Russian firm control over about 20% of the U.S. uranium reserve. The current president had this to say today about that.
I will say this, the uranium situation with Russia getting uranium, they better look into that. That is looking like a very serious situation.
John Solomon of The Hill has been all over the story since the beginning. Today, he's reporting that Bill Clinton sought permission to meet with a Russian nuclear official while the Obama administration was reaching a final decision on the deal. John Solomon, as we just said, wrote that piece, and he joins us now. So, John, this is actually a remarkable fact, if true, and it looks like you proved it in your piece, that the former president, Bill Clinton, whose wife was then Secretary of State, sought to meet with an official from the very company trying to buy Uranium One.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and the timing is really interesting because Hillary had just come back from Moscow, set a lot of business things in motion between the United States and Russia, and Bill Clinton's coming right through her jet stream and trying to figure out what's going on. He gets a $500,000 check while he's there, and he's at least seeking permission to meet with some people who had a direct interest in what his wife was doing. Now, they say at the end they decided not to do the meetings, but it does raise a new question about who knew what.
But he requested it.
He requested permission from the State Department. Now, who wanted to meet with him? Who knows who requested what? But we do know that he asked for permission to go see these people.
What would be the innocent explanation for why Bill Clinton would want to meet with a nuclear...
With Russia, there's nothing that's innocent, right? Somebody has a motive. And so it could be the Russian officials wanted to follow up on the Hillary Clinton visit and see what the husband knew, right? The former president. Could he carry some water? Or it could be he was looking to do something over in Russia to do something well for him, for his family. We talked to somebody, someone very close, a close friend of the president, who said he was involved in conversations in 2010 before the president went over to Russia, and that they were talking about doing something, getting some business relationships going that would benefit a family business that they were talking about. And I don't know any more than that right now, but that that may be a possible motive for the trip.
So if the Russians wanted to talk to the husband of the Secretary of State, and business deals were germinating at this time between the U.S. and Russia, it sounds like the Russians really had their eye on Hillary Clinton.
They did. There's not any doubt about that. And over the next couple of weeks, we're going to continue to report out some very interesting details about how much the U.S. government knew about Russia's intentions towards the Clintons and what they were trying to do to influence them. A lot more evidence than what's in the public domain right now.
You don't have to believe that there's hidden information, though clearly there is, and you're uncovering it. But even that aside, the fact that the Obama administration gave control over 20% of our uranium to the Russians, was there ever a policy rationale for that?
Well, at the time, they said there was no national security issue, if you remember, in 2015. And the argument was, listen, if we don't buy the Russians uranium, they'll go sell it on the black market, or they'll give it to Iran or North Korea, something we don't want. But we learned this week, this whole story started on Monday with us, where we reported that the FBI in 2009 proved that Rosatom, its 10X arm here in the United States, was making bribery, kickbacks, extortion, and money laundering right here in the United States while the Clintons were and Obama administration were approving this deal. So there was a good reason not to give Rosatom the uranium. They were engaged in criminal activity.
So you just hinted at something coming up, that you believe the efforts to suborn Hillary, to influence Hillary by the Russians were broader than we know.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There were multiple efforts to try to win influence, to try to gain access to her. Now, listen, she's a Secretary of State. That's not surprising, but I think we'll get some detail and some specifics about how they tried to do it. Some of the people who made the overtures are going to be pretty famous when you find out who they are. But there was a concerted effort to focus on Hillary Clinton in 09 and 10, and there's a good reason. She was the face of the reboot, the reset with Russia, right? They wanted to know what the heck she was doing, and they put some influence efforts underway.
And Sarah, we've spent the last 11 months hearing from Democrats that there's no greater peril to the United States than Russia. It's pretty amazing. John, thank you for all your reporting on this.
Thanks, Tucker. Appreciate it.
I can't wait to see this new story. Well, an NFL player who says it's his Christian duty to kneel for the anthem to protest racism joins us next. He's white. He's got a whole take on this and a long op-ed, and he'll explain his rationale. Stay tuned. The debate over the NFL anthem protest has persistently been framed in racial terms. Most protesting players have been African American. They say they're kneeling to protest the treatment of black Americans by the police. Critics of anthem protests, meanwhile, are routinely labeled as racist. Clint Gresham played for the Seattle Seahawks for 6 seasons. He's currently a free agent. He's white. He says, though, as a Christian, it's his duty to kneel alongside the black players to show solidarity against racism. Clint Gresham joins us tonight to explain. Clint, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Tucker. It's good to be here.
So I'm convinced of your sincerity completely. You're a Christian, and you wrote a long, interesting op-ed on this subject. And I'm also convinced that there is racism in America. You said you experienced it yourself in the NFL. What I don't understand is why the existence of bigoted people means that you protest the symbols of the country itself.
Yeah. If I fought in World War II, or my son died in Vietnam,
right,
and I go to a national football game and I'm sitting there and I'm watching players protest against the very thing that my son died for, I can see why that would cause a problem. I totally get that. And when Colin Kaepernick first kneeled, I had a problem with it because I didn't understand where guys were coming from. And what I also know was that the 6 years that I spent in the National Football League with guys that I otherwise wouldn't have had any time with just because we're in different places in our world, it also showed me that it's just as hard for them to watch a video of someone who looks like them being shot by a police officer, and there seems to be no apparent justice for that. So I get that. And because of that, players have chosen to have a nonviolent protest to bring awareness to something that is unfortunate in our society.
Well, I'm with you up until the end, and I'm for nonviolent protest, of course. I just don't understand why people who've reaped more benefits from this country than almost anyone else in the country, that is pro athletes, NFL players, are protesting the country itself. The country is a decent place. There's some crummy people here, but the country itself is good, and that's why these guys are succeeding in it and live these incredibly entitled lives. So, like, why attack the country? That's always been my problem with this.
Yeah, and you know, the truth is that they do have millions of dollars.
Yeah.
But the reality is that getting millions of dollars doesn't make the pain go away. Like, we both know that someone who is rich but is empty inside their heart, that doesn't make that pain stop. Just because you have a ton of money, it doesn't make you any more happier.
That is
like, just
for
because
sure
you get
the
$1 million when you're 25, it doesn't take away from the sting that you felt from the 25 years leading up to that point.
No, and in fact, it's probably bad for you. No, I agree with that. But again, and you're absolutely right, and the world is littered with unhappy rich people, that's for sure. In fact, I think it probably makes them less happy to be that successful. I just don't I think the fact that they have been successful is evidence that the deal that America makes with its citizens is basically on the level, which is like, be good at something, work hard, and you can succeed. So it's not the country's fault. That's the point I'm making. Why are they blaming the country? It's a good country. And when they say it's a bad country, it's a lie.
It's a fantastic country. It's a fantastic country. And I am so grateful to have the opportunity to live in this country. There are people who are fighting and clamoring, trying to live in this country to create a better life for themselves. But the reality is that our soldiers did not go fight and die in other nations to allow systemic racism to continue to exist in this country. And so, while we're not perfect, of course our country isn't perfect, we're still going to stand up and we're going to fight for injustice. We're going to fight against inequality so that there is freedom and justice for everybody.
Yeah, I think you're misguided. I actually think the message that it's sending is like this whole thing is a joke and like who cares about America? I don't think that it's sending that message at all. But you know, I hope you're right. Clint, thanks for joining us
From
tonight.
being in a guy, yeah.
Thank you. How does North Korea's high command get intel about this country? They watch cable news. We'll tell you what one of the Hermit Kingdom's generals said about our business. Stay tuned. So how's North Korea preparing for a possible war against the West? Obviously by watching MSNBC. NBC News foreign correspondent Keir Simmons recently talked to a lieutenant colonel in the North Korean Armed Forces. The colonel said he watches Morning Joe every day to gain insight into how America views itself. Of course, Morning Joe is the perfect distillation of elite opinion, New York, LA, and Washington in a glass. In particular, the tendency of those cities to be wrong about pretty much everything from Iraqi WMD to the Russian election sabotage to Hillary Clinton becoming president. So it's possible that it's all an elaborate counterintelligence operation designed to mislead the North Koreans. The North Korean officer apparently also said he believes his country can defeat America in war. So maybe it's working. That's it for us tonight. A Hannity special.